Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 3 of Queer Story Time. Just give me 1 second to get Drummond in here. Good day, sir.
Hello.
How are you? Nice to see you.
I'm doing well. It's different being on the bottom of the screen.
No comment. Oh, making silly sexual jokes.
You know, I'm versatile. It's all good.
Right? Well, thank you for being here. Hello, the onslaught of people that are coming in. Welcome, everybody. So this is Yoga Mat is ready. That's another class. Welcome, everybody. So this is episode number 3 of Queer Story Time. And Queer Story Time is a space for queer people to share their stories. Their story as a queer person, not only personally, but professionally, and kind of how those all intersect in life in general. So I'm glad to have Mr. Drummond here. So Drummond, if we could start out by you giving a little background about yourself, your bio, so to speak, and then I would like to start with, after that, with you kind of painting the picture of your life journey as a gay man.
Sure. I guess a quick bio of me would be I do LGBT QIA plus coaching. It's all about self-love and helping LGBT people kind of reach their goals in life because I feel like our community definitely struggles when it comes to self-worth, self-love, just because of all the struggles and normalcy of the heterosexual norm. I think that a lot of us grow up in a world where uh, we're told that if we don't fall into this structure, then we're not going to do well. And I'm here to help people realize that we don't have to fit in. And I think that it's actually a strength to kind of, from an early age, have to kind of fight against the social norms and social structure that's been existing for so long. And that's kind of what I've been doing. I started my life coaching career almost 3 years ago now, so excited about that. I've gotten to the point where I'm kind of slowly moving to that being my very full-time entrepreneurship job, which is
Love
super
that.
exciting. Love it. And then, of course, I've also got like my social media presence that is, I mean, has been helping me grow so amazingly in so many different ways, connection wise as well as professional wise.
That's great. So, yeah, I think, I mean, and we've had private conversations about this, but I think that there's so much work that needs to be done in the queer community in terms of us just healing our shit and having the tools to be able to do that. So I'm absolutely supportive of the work that you do as a life coach. I think it's so important um, that people be able to go to individuals that are going to affirm their gender and sexual orientation and just their experiences, LGBT individuals. And so why don't you, yeah, so from here, why don't you begin wherever you would like to start in your life, your journey. Maybe you can start with this recognition that I think all of us have when we're younger, like we have these different feelings and we have these attractions that we don't fully understand, and there's so much to work through because of cultural expectations, because of religious expectations, other expectations. So why don't you start there if you don't mind?
Yeah, we can go that route. So when it comes to when I started to kind of realize that I was different than other people, it was probably as early as like probably third grade,
Mm,
when all the other little boys were talking about girls, and I didn't really know why I didn't. feel comfortable. For a while I thought maybe it was because I was pretty much brought up by my mother. I had two sisters growing up, so I had a different relationship with women than a lot of the guys that were speaking about them in a sexual way, as sexual as a third grader could be in that situation. And I just felt very uncomfortable hanging out with guys. And I, I didn't really understand what gay was probably until middle school, when we started doing like the locker room type stuff, where if you looked at someone, they were like smacking each other with shirts and calling each other gay. And I kind of had to learn what that meant. There was definitely a lot of times where I was just very fascinated with the male body. My dad was very absent in my life, so I didn't really have a relationship with my dad. So a lot of the things where it comes to, oh, well, there was an overbearing mother and an absent father, and I had that. I also, when it came to finally understanding what gay was and hearing the negative about it, I don't know if you dove into my YouTube channel, but I had an experience where my uncle had taken advantage of me at the age of 5. And that also played a really huge role in not understanding what I was, because I didn't know if that event had somehow messed me up mentally to where I was now sexually attracted to men. I did as I started getting older, because I did grow up with a Christian background and a Christian upbringing. I heard that gay was a sin and that man shouldn't lay with man. And, but my feelings were I was attracted to men and I wanted to be with men. It wasn't so much of a sexual thing. That probably came like high school, college level type stuff.
Right.
My first experience with a guy was in college, but like kind of knowing what type of dreams that I was having. And when I saw a guy, like I was fascinated by his body and not so much the girls. So hearing what the church had to say about the gay community also kind of put a very strong like sense of who I am is not right. I did a lot of praying to try to pray the gay away. Like I can still remember like the times when I'd be like in the shower and I was like praying for like the water to like wash it out. And it was definitely a very interesting journey. I definitely had to learn to accept myself for being gay. I had to put distance between me and the church. And then that was a whole journey for me to kind of bring that part of myself back, because I do still consider myself very religious. I still am very tied to my faith. It's very different than it was, because I think when you have a faith that tells you that you're not right, you kind of have to go through that journey of relearning what faith means to you. And I think that it was hard going through it, but I think that it made me a stronger person with my faith, because for me personally, my faith is tied to love. And I think that a lot of religions aren't super tied to that anymore. I feel like religions are a lot more, oh, this is sin, you're a sinner. I don't really look at religion in that aspect. I look at it as a guiding force to do good in the world. And that's kind of how I tied myself back into like the church. And I mean, I've got amazing, beautiful friends within the church. I went back to a new church this weekend for the very first time, which was beautiful. I met so many amazing people that were super loving and super accepting. And it was kind of nice to get back into the swing of things. But it definitely took a lot of self-love and a journey to really dig down deep and heal all those parts that were traumatized by society and by the Christian church and by family members and loved ones and whoever had anything negative to say about who I was as a person. And then since that, healing happened, revisiting the church where before I was very traumatized and I just felt like I was wearing a sign on my head that said homosexual on it. Uh,
Right.
Now I went back with a very confident self-love and relationship with
Mm.
God that I didn't feel nervous. I felt like I was where I was meant to be. And as I was kind of looking around the congregation, I was just like, I wonder if there are other people that are on that journey that I've been on and trying to find that place of balance between the two worlds because I've honestly been just as attacked by the gay community for being Christian as I have by Christians for being gay. And it's hard to feel like you're both and just be pushed away from both sides to kind of where you stand alone and you have to figure out a way to be both and still love yourself for being both of those things.
Drummond, I had no idea we had very similar experiences. I don't want to make this about myself, but I do, since we're on the subject matter, talk about this. Um, because my dad is a Methodist minister, so I grew up Christian as well. I grew up as a pastor's kid. Um, well, maybe one queer story time, I will tell this story in more detail, but I want to say, because we brought it up, is that, and I probably will repeat this multiple times in these future queer story times, um, there has been real harm done by that verse in the Bible that says, a man shall not lie with another man. And I want to say that there are some major transitionings happening in the church right now. I don't mean to make this conversation about religion and church and all of that, but it's an important topic in this context. There's been a lot of research and investigation, and I've talked with my father, who has a doctoral degree in theology, about this conversation countless times. And there's evidence that has kind of surfaced over the last couple of years that is pointing to the fact that that verse in the Bible was a mistranslation, very intentionally and specifically by a group of white straight men who, I believe, so there's a new documentary out called 1946. And I don't think they've completed the documentary yet, but it's so important that us as queer people that have suffered the consequences of hearing the message, you're going to hell because you're gay and shouldn't lie with a person of the same sex. That verse was meant to be translated as, a man shall not lie with a child. It was in reference to pedophilia, not consensual homosexuality. So I'm going to repeat that and repeat that and repeat that until people begin to realize the grievous harm that has been done to us because of that incorrect translation. So I just wanted to point that out because I think it's super important, and I will step down off my pedestal now. But you continue your story.
Yeah, I mean, I think that most religions, I'm not going to say all, because most religions I feel like somehow steer you away from the LGBT lifestyle in a way that's, I think, very dangerous too. And for the most part, I would say most people grow up with some type of ties to religion. I think now that we're starting to become a lot more progressive, there are a lot more people who are disconnecting their lives from religion. And I think that that's great because most people that I've seen in that sense, those types of parents are the type of people that open the door for all of the space and allow their child to make a decision based upon knowledge of all, which I think is an amazing thing to do for any child. And I think that we kind of talked about this last time on my live, I think, where we talked about kind of removing the normalcy of this like structure of like what is gender and like all of these types of things that are so normalized that kind of traumatize the LGBT community. I think that if we can start to remove those types of things and make normal be, here's everything and here's your choices. This is the world that you live in, and it's very diverse and colorful and beautiful in every single way. And if we could normalize that way of thinking instead of this is the way I was born and raised, and that's the way you're going to be born and raised, and then that's going to be the way your children are born and raised. I think that the more we can like normalize just being unique and different, and that's great. I think that that will create a better world for future generations. And honestly, I feel like the biggest problems in the world today is because so many people try to impose their views and thoughts on communities that don't want to have those views and thoughts.
Right. Yeah, this is one of my intentions in doing Queer Storytime, is because I know there's so many in our community that have this same story, and people need to hear about it because it can't be healed unless we're vocalizing it and talking about it. So yeah, it's important that you know, not just people in this room that are watching right now, but people that will watch this recording, especially the queer youth who are in households, specifically the queer minor youth, like under 18, that are in households where they're still under their parental control, that may be receiving messages such as these, to know here both Drummond and I are proving that it does get better, and that there is a rainbow, a fabulous fucking rainbow at the end of all of that suffering and trauma that you're experiencing right now. So there's a community of loving people at the end. So that will be available to you, which is another reason for Queer Storytime to get that message out.
I think that's something that's really important when it comes to the trauma that we have as children, is that we heal that as adults. And the gay community is a very traumatized community. And unfortunately, even adults seem to hold on to that trauma, and that trauma hurts other people within our own community. And I think that it's important for people to realize the uttermost importance of self-healing, because, I mean, even I, as someone who literally, that's my career, like, I'm healing every day. Like,
Right.
it's those small little triggers that I feel of, like, wanting to lash back out or close my shell and never open it again. Those are the moments when I have to take note of, why am I feeling this way, and what about my life is like hitting this trigger so hard. And I think that the gay community, it, as fast as we run away from the pain of our childhood, we run into this world and start creating new pain for the people around us. And I think it's important to realize that as a gay community as a whole, we've got to do better at healing ourselves, because if we don't, we're creating a world of trauma that people are trying to run away from in their past, and we're creating new trauma because we hurt each other when we don't heal.
Right.
And those triggers that our childhood has created in us become explosions and bombs in people's current life. And it's so important to not do that, because, I mean, I've been in so many LGBT spaces, and they're blowing up. Like, every little bomb is just like blowing up and creating more shrapnel that's like wounding more people in the room than it is helping. And I think that it's really important to, as a role model in the gay community, be someone who takes the time to heal first before you put yourself in front of an audience of people that are already vulnerable. Because if someone asks a question that triggers you and you blow up, you're going to do a lot more harm than good. And I think that the gay community as a whole needs to do a lot of healing.
Right, right. Yeah, there's a word in the yoga world, it's samsara, that means essentially cycles of suffering. So suffering begets suffering. If you don't heal it, you're passing it on. And yeah, really, I think I may have said this when I was live with you, or you know, some of these conversations are all intermixed in my head. I don't know who I had it with, but you know, it's so important as LGBT people to you know, if you can get access to a therapist or to a life coach, um, you know, somebody that's going to help you process through what it is that you experienced in your life so that you can transform it and not pass it on to others. I know Drummond and I in his live a couple days ago were talking about the issues with dating in the gay male community specifically, um, which and I think both he and I can attest to the fact that it's fairly obvious rather quickly whether somebody has done work on themselves, or they said, or as you just said, you know, those moments where somebody becomes so uncomfortable with something that they kind of explode on you, and then the relationship ends. I had that happen to me recently, and I was like, so this is, yeah, again, why it's important to have these conversations so that they can serve as, you know, if you're in a place of, those that are watching, if you're in a place that, you know, you haven't quite acknowledged the suffering and trauma that you may have experienced in your life, let this serve as a moment, let this live serve as a place of kind of self-reflection and really start asking yourself questions. And this is why, like, having these conversations is so important, so that we can kind of, it's not about comparing our suffering and saying, oh, what you experienced was worse. It's really about, like, no, here's another LGBT person who has experienced like deep levels of suffering, and using that as a point of reflection for yourself, which is a lifelong process. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, if you've got a room full of people that are constant, like, Clubhouse has been a beautiful place for connection, but it's also been a place of, like, watching how one time bomb can set off the next time bomb, and it just really becomes a very unhealthy place. And
Yeah.
I think that it's important to realize that no matter what your struggle is, like, it's something that requires a lot of communication, a lot of healing, therapy, anything that, if you can't do it yourself, like, definitely pull someone else in, and not friends, not people on
No.
Clubhouse that are not certified to help you with that. Like, get professional help, because
Right.
it's very different. Because one thing I've learned is when friends try to help friends, triggers start happening, and then it becomes dangerous, because when you feel like no one cares and you're saying that to a friend who is sitting there listening to you, that triggers them, because they're sitting there trying to help. They don't have the tools to, but they're trying. And then when you say things like, no one cares, I feel so alone, that can trigger them to say something that might make the situation worse. And I mean, I've been in spaces where people who are not trained to give advice, or to see the big picture, give rather horrible advice that could be very triggering and send people ricocheting in the wrong direction when it comes to healing. And I think that that can be really dangerous.
Right. Yeah, and I part of our work in healing ourselves is learning to hold space for others' suffering. And we don't, you know, in our Western culture, we want a quick fix. Like, we're expected to provide somebody an answer, but there is real healing that could be done in the LGBT community and the gay male community very specifically, for just simply holding space for one another and letting one another talk, and like feeling that energetic sense of that just energetic acknowledgement of, I hear you, I feel you, I've gone through the same thing, without necessarily the expectation that you're trying to heal them. Because the fact of the matter is, we are the only people that heal ourselves. Therapists and coaches, physicians, whoever it is, professionals only serve as guides for us, but ultimately we do the work ourselves, and we're the ones that ultimately have to make our lives better. But yeah, as Drummond is saying, absolutely reach out for help. We can't be expected to do the work of healing on our own. Um, because then we're kind of operating from our own bias and our own sense of perception. So it helps to outwardly discuss these things with a professional, whether it's a coach or a doctor or a therapist or whomever. That's so beneficial. And I would say if you are unsure of who you should contact, I will say, please reach out to me and I will find a resource for you. And I'm sure Drummond feels the same way as well. Even if he and I could not help you, there's plenty of other resources that can help you to be the best version of yourself that you can be. So, Drummond, I'm curious, now that you've told us a little bit about your personal story, and yes, John Silver's music, and don't be afraid to take time away. Yes, yes, yes. We were just kind of talking about that this morning in the self-love room. That's another important point, John, is that we can't place any expectations on our healing. Healing is a lifelong process and journey. And I always frame it to my clients as, think of like there's this big boulder or iceberg in your life. It's those moments of it's what we do with those moments of discomfort that throughout life, when we become uncomfortable, that we slowly chip away at that boulder or that iceberg or whatever, and slowly over time that thing gets smaller and smaller, so it has so much less power over you, which is important to acknowledge and important to remember, is that there's no big bang of healing. It doesn't all just go away at once. So being patient and open to the process versus the destination is an important point. I lost my train of thought, but did you have anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I mean, the boulder or iceberg kind of analogy, I like to talk about it as if it's like a basement. And as a child, you're collecting experiences, and a lot of those experiences can hold traumatic like mindsets that kind of follow you into adulthood. And as a child, you can't process those things. As an adult, you can see things with an adult mind. And I always say, go down into your basement and check on some of those things that you collected, which is your formed reality, and kind of open those boxes up, take a look and see if, as an adult looking at that, is that something that's real, or is that something that as a child you created a reality around that experience? And just go down there and kind of don't expect to unpack the whole thing in one day, like
right.
One box at a time. And I think that when it comes to healing your childhood traumas, which is so important, the traumas you come in contact with as an adult, they will seem like instances instead of like a blowing up of your whole world and how you perceive it. Because once you've healed stuff from your childhood, like that wound is like healed. And a lot of things as an adult that become triggers or traumas are from way back then. So going through your adult life, if you've taken time to really heal a lot of the stuff from your past, it doesn't really phase you as much as an adult. I've come in contact with people who haven't really done the self-healing process, and everything triggers them because there's so much in there that they haven't healed, that it's just so the world is so triggering because the world is full of triggers. And sometimes we lash out at people that we love based upon something they've said that maybe hit a trigger of something that maybe our parents said to us when we were 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old. And it's so interesting when you go back and just kind of heal those things, because you got to be careful. Those past triggers and traumas can destroy everything in your future if you don't take the time to heal those different things.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And this is where I like to talk a little bit about the science of all of this stuff, because we literally, so there's a saying in kind of the psychology world and in the yoga world that your issues are in your tissues. And that's so true, because we know that trauma is not those tissues, these kind of tissues. Although you might blow your issues in those kind of tissues. That is hilarious.
No, but look what I've got like written on. You got assume positive intent, be present. Like I wrote those on like the box during other lives just to kind of like remind me. So like that's funny.
Love it. But yes, that are the things that are, it's actually helpful in these conversations to define trauma. So trauma is a perturbance away from what we deem in our daily lives to be safe. And when there's this kind of trigger response that put us into this, like, you know, if a tiger's chasing you, you start running and flee the situation. Or you freeze and play dead is essentially what happens. And what happens with LGBT people is we have had little, some may have experienced big traumas in their life. But for so many LGBT people, there are kind of micro traumas that, like, hearing that message of you're going to hell, or a man doesn't lie with another man over and over and over and over, that becomes embodied in your nervous system. And so the process becomes, how can we kind of move that energy, so to speak? How can we move that out of our body? Trauma doesn't just happen in the mind. It's, we embody physically those experiences. So that's why I'm such a huge proponent of like mindful movement practices, because sometimes it's not just enough to talk about it. We need to, you know, I think a lot of people can kind of acknowledge the fact that, like, you know, when you go on a walk with a friend and you're kind of processing through something, that by the end of the walk, you feel better about the situation. Well, there's a whole neuropsychology to that. But my point being is it's so important to kind of have a mixture of practices, whether it's life coaching, yoga, Tai Chi, going for walks, being out in nature, doing things that are going to soothe your nervous system. Because as you said, Drummond, so many of us are so triggered all the time, and we literally live in that fight or flight response. And that is not how we are meant to live. We are meant to live in a kind of soothe, easeful state of being. That fight or flight response is really only supposed to be temporary, like if a tiger's chasing you or whatever. So it's very important to acknowledge that. And it's just an important part of the conversation that kind of gets lost sometimes, is that we embody this and we need to like move it physically, energetically, emotionally, spiritually. Otherwise, we're going to continue to embody it and pass it on to other people. So,
yeah. And I mean, you think about like the traumatic experiences of why we're being told we're going to hell. It's love. So like straight people are celebrated for loving their partner, and people, I mean, even our childhood, like if we dated someone of the opposite sex, like we were congratulated on that love. Right. And like love is a healing, beautiful thing. Like love, kindness, self-love, it's all something that we are supposed to do. Like that's what the Bible wants you to do. That's what other religions want you to do, is love. Whereas when we, like, it is very different to love. Like I've had female like partners when I was still in the closet, and I loved them, meaning I didn't want anything bad to happen to them. I thought they were great people. But when you get older and you form a gay relationship where like this is your attraction to them in every way possible. It's like this extremely deep, and it feels so right, and it's like something you've never experienced before. But then in the back of your head, that's sin, that's disgusting, that's, you're going to hell for it. This amazing feeling that you're finally like, you're like, oh my gosh, like this is what it feels like to be in love with someone. And then the message with that feeling is, you're disgusting, this is wrong, you're going to hell, you're going to burn for this. Like, to have those types of words wrapped around such a beautiful thing, like, it's traumatizing. And then you think of, like, when it comes to relationships, especially with men, like, it's, how do you love someone? You are literally, those strong urges and feelings that you have to just connect with another human being, your society and religion has wrapped it with hatred. And it's so hard to, because I mean, when my first relationship, because we were both still very tied to our religious beliefs, anytime it went wrong, which relationships happen, I felt like it was God telling me that what I was doing was absolutely wrong, and that was a sin, and that it was like God's putting his hand down to stop it. And that was my mindset, because anything that was going wrong was my religious beliefs tying it back to that message of, it's a sin, it's hate, this is wrong. And that throws a whole new like equation into love. Whereas straight people from a very, very young age, right at the beginning, that's celebrated. Like, the parents get super excited. Of course, they get the do not have sex talk, because that'll get the girl pregnant. But like, the gay love that should be celebrated is destroyed. And you don't really have those role models to kind of show you that. Like we talked about this last time, where a generation above us was wiped off the planet by HIV. And
Right.
so we don't see gay relationships in older generations. Of course, the ones that made it through that pandemic, like, there are some relationships, but even within that, like, there's still a lot of trauma that society never let heal. I think our generation is the first ones where we're pushing through, and it's hard to go through the dating world and try to find someone that isn't extremely traumatically destroyed, who can actually communicate and have a healthy way to like display your love for someone. It's so hard to navigate through those waters in the gay community. I have lots of straight friends, and I have those conversations, and they're just like, yeah, you just say this. And I'm like, yeah, but then you add this. And they're like, well, just say this. And I'm like, but then you've got this. And it's like, a gay relationship, you have to be, are they out to their family? Are they comfortable being around their friends with a relationship? Or are you just a friend? Would they go to church with you? Do they even see that? Are they okay with being your boyfriend or partner in the workplace? Or are they your roommate? All these things that never existed for the like straight community when they're talking about relationships are like huge weights on a relationship where we're all traumatized already, and now we've already got more weights on the idea of forming that relationship with someone. It's just, there's no wonder the gay community struggles so hard when it comes to forming a relationship and having it last.
Yeah, and I just want to point to this comment here that John said. It's not that heterosexual people don't experience trauma. It's that they don't experience trauma on top of cultural trauma that says your relationship is sinful. And so that adds a whole other layer to this equation that becomes embodied in us as queer people, as gay people. But the other thing I wanted to point out here is that you just reminded me of when you talking about the word sin, another mistranslation. The word sin comes from, I believe it's Greek or Hebrew, the word hamartia. And I'm probably grossly mispronouncing that. I don't speak Greek or Hebrew. My dad does, but I don't have him on the phone right now to pronounce it.
Pull them up on the live.
Seriously. I was actually thinking about doing that, but he'd have to probably be on my sister's Instagram account. Um, so the word hamartia translates as to miss the mark. It doesn't mean this kind of moral condemnation that radical conservative Christians have deemed the word to be. It literally means to miss the mark. Guess what? Straight people are missing the mark in many ways every day. It's not just gay people, and it's not to say that we as gay people are missing the mark by identifying as gay or lesbian. It's just pointing at the fact that we as human beings often miss the mark in life. So that's not a message that you hear in church every Sunday, but as a pastor's kid, I want to get that message out there. So there's another little important nugget in this conversation. I'm trying to think. There's so many things floating around in my mind. So I want to know more about we've talked a little bit more about dating, the dating world and the issues that arise in that regard. Curious, in your work as a health coach, obviously without disclosing any identities or anything of your clients, what do you see as common issues among the LGBT community through the experiences that your clients have told you about? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it's very interesting because we talk about societal norms that are like very anti-LGBT. So society as a whole makes us feel like we can't be LGBT. But even within the LGBT community, our community has norms that are placed on the community, and that adds a lot of stress to LGBT people because we aren't as open-minded as like we would like to think we are. I think that people think just because you are more liberal than you are conservative that you are open-minded, but most people have their opinion of what each letter of the LGBT community stands for and how you identify, and therefore as that identifier you are now this. And a lot of people have issues with that because we are all unique individuals and we are not a stereotype, and there is so much more to us than our sexual identity. I think that a lot of people think it's all encompassing, like the gay community, like we are all lumped together and therefore we are all somehow very close related to our opinions and views. But like where you grew up, how your parents like showed you the world, the different types of passions that we all have. We're just as diverse, if not more, than the rest of the world. And I feel like so many people get so tangled up in those stereotypes that then they get lost in finding their own identity. So a lot of the work that I do is not only untangling the societal norms pushed on by the world, but then the gay community in general, to kind of help people realize that no matter what goal they have for themselves, no matter what sparks their passions, it's perfectly okay to do all of it. Like, there's so many titles, and even when you like fall into just like, say, just the gay men within our own community, there's a list. And I think that for me, I've never felt like I fit any of those. So I think that I kind of escaped that because I didn't feel like I identified as any of those. Like when people start, I mean, even with your music taste, people try to find ways to be like, okay, you're this kind of gay. For me, I was more of a country person. So I grew up hiking and camping and listening to country music. And so when I went out to the clubs, of course I loved like listening to the songs that were playing because it's fun to dance to. But when I went home, I was sitting there like jamming out to Carrie Underwood or Shania Twain. or Dolly Parton. And that's where my music kind of came from. And I was just like, well, because they'd always list off, they're like, okay, who's your queen? And I'm like, none of those are really the ones I identify with. But I just think that there's so many things that press labels on people, and then they feel like, well, if I add this label, then I have to fit the stereotype of that label. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's really toxic way of thinking. I think we can all be our individual selves and find similarities in the people around us, but don't let those similarities define your whole person. Like, your friends shouldn't define whether or not you do something that you're passionate about. Like, if you're really into reading, or if you're really into like different board games, or I'm trying to think of things that people get attacked for, don't let people make you feel lesser than for doing something that you're passionate about. I think anime is something that I've heard people make fun of people for. If you love that, like, love it. I think that those types of things, that's where your doors start opening for like finding the career path that's just like perfect for you. I think that the gay community also puts down like the type of work that gay people are supposed to do. Like, of course, people are like fashion. When they think of gay people, and I'm like, not me. That's not my thing. I love listening to gay people that are passionate about it, because I love seeing someone passionate about something. But I also think that there's a lot of people out there that really could care less about fashion, but they talk about it all the time because they think that that's what they're supposed to do, because that's what gay people do. And it's such a toxic thing to label yourself. And if it's not something you love, don't do it. Don't fall into that trap, because I mean, we've fought so hard to get out of the closet, and then we like put new chains on. And I think that that's so horrible for the community. Like, yes, we want to fit in and be loved, but you should be loved for being exactly who you are. And it's so hard for us to not fall into that toxic behavior again, because we spent most of our childhood pretending to be someone else, to be loved by the people around us, that then we run from them and we're alone, and we find a community, the LGBT community. So then we put on the new chains because we want to be loved by these people, when we really should take the time to love ourselves for all of the things that really spark that flame inside of us, and learn to love ourselves that way. Because at that time, when you really love something and you're passionate about it and you put all your energy into it, that energy goes out and it pulls all the same people towards you, and you form a group of people that love you for you, instead of love you because you're living the stereotype that they want you to live because you're part of a community.
Right. Yeah, I experienced that too, growing up in the Christian church and feeling pulled by the church, feeling pulled by the gay community. And it was always like, who the hell am I? And like in this fighting for my identity. And it took me a long time, lots of yoga practice personally, to parse through that. There's actually a really awesome saying that one of my Buddhist teachers says, and it's perfectly applicable to what we're talking about. He says, oneness is not sameness. So even though we as a gay LGBT community may have this common identity of being a sexual minority, we may have oneness in that way. Oneness is really supposed to be a celebration of diversity, not of sameness, not of saying you have to be this way because you are in this group of people. That's so restrictive and repressive and re-traumatizing. So, to the LGBT youth that may be listening now or in the future, know that you tune into yourself and define yourself as you see fit, is ultimately what it comes down to, because there's just no point in there's no point in getting wrapped up in what, expending energy on trying to be someone that you're not at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I saw the comment where it said a lot of gay people are more judgmental than they seem. And I think that that comes with the trauma that is held, because I feel like people who have self-love and who have healed don't judge other people. I mean, even within our own community, I think that people who are in the career path of like sex work are very judged. And I think that for me personally, like I I see that as something that some people do for fun. Sex should be celebrated. I don't think that there needs to be a stigma around sex. And then, of course, we've got people who are doing it for a living. That's how they make money. And I think that no one should be shamed for that, because not everyone has a family that can support them through a pandemic or through hard times. A lot of LGBT youth are thrown out on the street. When it comes to the trans community, I think that that community also is very heavy in the sex work, and that's a very unsafe like career path, and a lot of people lose their lives going into that. And I think that the stigma around it needs to kind of be lifted off of that community, because no matter the reason for why it's done, that's that person's life, and that doesn't make them any lesser of a person. That they're still people that are living their life, whether it's supporting themselves the best way that they can, whether it's them celebrating their sexual like experiences. Like I always tell people, do whatever makes you happy. If it's something that's you do and then you hate yourself for it at the end of the day, like find a way to move past that and find a new place to be. But the gay community is extremely judgmental. The world is extremely judgmental. That's why I said we have to lift up what is normal. We have to normalize these are people's lives, and they can choose to do with it the way that they want. There are people out there that will love and support them for exactly who they are, what they want to do as a career. And I think that for me, I think it's very interesting because I seem to pull in a very, when it comes to LGBT, I think that people see me as a little bit more conservative because of the type of content I create. And then they assume that my mind is closed to those types of people. And I just want them to know that, like, for me, I've discovered self-love, and the only thing I want for other people is for them to discover the same thing. And if they can do it doing sex work and celebrating themselves in that way, like, I do not judge them. I think that, I mean, I've got lots of friends that do that type of stuff, and I love them as people. They are some of the most supportive people of my career. And I absolutely love them as people. And it's crazy how judgmental other people are, because they'll see me liking someone's post on social media and I get a message like, did you know that they have an OnlyFans and that they do sex work? And I'm like, yeah, they're my friend. I'm aware of that. And even if I wasn't, I'm still their friend because they're great people. We've got to look past those types of things and stop being so judgmental in those ways, because, I mean, I had a friend that he came out to me and I brought him into a gay club, because for me, that's where I learned to be myself in public and not feel so scared to do it. And the first night I brought him out, someone told him that he should go back into the closet because someone who looks like him won't be accepted by the gay community. And I was just like, wow, this place that was so magical for me just became this traumatizing place for this other person. And I created, when I lived in Florida, I created LGBT for gay youth. The Trevor Project took it over after I left. But there were so many people, I was trying to find gay role models for younger people so that they had a good idea. But a lot of the role models started taking them to the clubs. And a lot of them were having traumatic experiences because of it, because the gay community isn't all about love and acceptance. Some of them are still very traumatized and throwing that hate out. And I was just like, look, like, we need role models. We need them to be role models for self-love, self-acceptance, going out into the world and finding what you're passionate about, not pulling them into the clubs of where there's lots of alcohol, where people's judgment's not so great and people can be a little bit more mean. And I think that just because the gay club is a great place for some people to find themselves, you have to be aware that it's not the most accepting place. When you add alcohol and drugs into the equation, things can be said and done that really destroy people's self-worth, and that's not what we're trying to do. We don't want the next generation to be traumatized. We want them to heal in their teens and their 20s so that when they get to their 30s, they aren't dealing with healing themselves as much as our current generation is having to do.
Right. Yeah, and this is another intention. I know for me, growing up as a pastor's kid, you know, and growing up in a spiritual tradition, I know some people grow up atheist. Whatever, you don't even have to be spiritual. But for me, in my experience, growing up the way that I did, I always felt like I wanted a spiritual space to have these discussions that was not the gay bars where drinking and whatever else is happening. And that's not to shame the people that go out and have fun at all. But when that's done repetitively and repetitively and repetitively, it becomes about hiding from your trauma. And it's so important for us to have safe spaces to be able to discuss this stuff and to acknowledge that we are spiritual beings, regardless of whether you define nature as God or whatever. I don't care, you know, how you define yourself spiritually, or you're atheist or whatever. We need some place to connect as human beings without all the bullshit that happens, that re-traumatizes us. And it's I know you and I are preaching to the choir, but sometimes it feels exhausting. Do you feel that way? Like the message is just not getting across, like we should be doing better here.
Yeah. I mean,
especially so these youth don't have to experience what we're having to process through now as adults, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, I think when you add drugs and alcohol into it, it's a numbing place and not a healing place. And when it comes to gay clubs, like gay clubs were first invented and put into place as a place for people to go hide from the world and experiment with their gay tendencies that the world called tendencies at the time.
Right.
And I had a room on Clubhouse where I said, what do we want the world to look like after this pandemic when the world starts back over? And a lot of gay people were saying spaces during the day, like places to display gay art, gay culture, gay like conversation. And I saw a comment talking about a place to talk about like sex positivity. I think spaces like that, like gay cafes where you can meet and you don't feel like you're being stared at by the world and judged, to where you can't reach across and hold someone's hand when they're talking about a moment that's really hard. Like creating more daytime spaces where you can have open, honest, good communications. Because the gay club, you can't talk over that music. Like you're yelling into each other's ears. That's meant for celebrating and dancing and just like feeling the music. Whereas a cafe might be a little bit better. An art exhibit would be even better because we can display gay artists' work. And there's so many things that I also think we look at gay bars that are shutting down because of this pandemic, and that's sad in a sense, but also gay bars were not very inclusive of the rest of the community. Like when it comes to trans people, when it comes to lesbians, when it comes to people that are non-binary, those people weren't represented in those spaces. They came
Mm,
to spaces because there aren't really spaces for them anywhere else.
yeah.
But it was a community that was very focused on gay men. Of course, I've seen
Mm,
lesbian bars pop up, but a lot of times they weren't as successful and they'd shut down quicker than the gay bars. So I think that with that in mind, creating a future that's way more inclusive, that is
yeah.
created as a space for people, because even now, like some friends that identified as gay or bi or lesbian, when I went to school with them, are now starting to find other titles for themselves that is more descriptive of how they feel as a person. And I think that those spaces have to encompass all of that so that people can go in and feel those things and
Right.
figure out how to identify. Because I think even the
Mm,
gay clubs made people feel like I have to identify as gay.
yeah.
Um,
Right.
and I think
Right.
that it's important to create spaces with intention of like, you can be whoever you want to be and you're going to be loved and accepted.
Yeah. And you deserve to label it if you want to label it. Yeah,
Or
I know.
go without a label if that's how you want.
Well, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Yeah, I'm hoping in having these conversations in future generations, we won't have to label ourselves and we can just show up as we are and nobody's going to judge us for how we show up. Um, because I think that's part of the felt sense that both you and I had and many other people, that we have to become something that we're not, because the community is telling us you have to behave this way or you have to act this way or you have to label yourself this way. It's exhausting. I feel exhausted talking about it.
Yeah.
um,
I mean, for me
and
personally, like I felt like I had to be more sexualized. I felt like to get attention, I had to give up the fact that I don't feel like I need my body all over the internet. Like I personally have a belief that for me personally, like that experience for me is something special that I want to have with with the person that I'm physically with at the moment. And I mean, I've also had some traumatizing things happen when I've sent a nude somewhere. So for me, I had to deal with that trauma. But I mean, I've done artistic nude photo shoots to kind of make myself feel more okay with my body, but it's not something that I feel the need to do anymore because I've kind of realized that it's okay to not be that way. I mean, of course, it's nice to get compliments and stuff online, but for me, like, I I much prefer someone to be like, "Wow, you are really smart. Wow, you have a lot of knowledge about that. You must have done a lot of research." That type of compliment to me like blows me away. Whereas like someone like sexualizing my body in a post where like I'm posting about like something educational and someone sexualizes my post, like I just
yeah,
feel so wronged. And I think that the gay community made me feel like I had to be sexual to be seen, and I didn't like
mm,
that feeling. It just didn't feel right for me. Not saying that other people should feel wrong for that, because I think however you feel to do it, but I was very pressured by the gay community to be very sexualized, and I didn't appreciate that.
I feel that you're preaching to the choir. Yeah, I'd like to frame this from the perspective, and then we'll wrap things up, because we're just after the hour here, that we want to identify as human beings what qualities of being are skillful and supportive and nourishing of not only ourselves but of other people. And we want to kind of move away from, through healing our own trauma, behaviors that facilitate judgment, criticism, condemnation, othering, separation, that serves nobody. So we all have to be doing the self-reflection work that allows us to kind of identify those things and have conversations with people. You know, we have to ask people what is okay with them. You know, one of the things is like on these dating apps, people just send you a picture of their genitals, and it's like that is trauma. Like, I did not consent to you sending me a picture of your genitals. And so these are conversations that we have to have, is like distinguishing what is going to be nourishing, generally speaking, to the community as a whole, and what's going to be repressive and re-traumatizing and judgmental, that's not going to serve us in our long-term healing, I would say. So I have some, you know what, I'm going to have to unplug myself and walk around my apartment. I have these questions called Super Soul Questions. I have it hung up on my fridge. I just need to grab it. They're not rapid fire.
Okay.
They are questions just to promote some self-reflection within my guests, to see what arises up. So don't feel pressure to be like, oh, I need to answer this super quickly.
Okay.
All right, so take a deep breath. Let it all out. Okay, Super Soul question number 1. I got this idea from Oprah. So, like, who doesn't love Oprah?
Perfect. Okay.
Because she always ends her interviews with like these questions, these kind of similar questions that she asks all her interviewees. So I was like, I'm gonna do that. All right, first question.
Okay.
What do you feel your purpose in life is?
I feel like to exist, and to always like dig deeper into myself and understand myself, because I'm the only person that can fully understand me, just like everyone can only fully understand themselves, and just understanding where I fit in the world, because the world's too big for me to fully understand it, but I can definitely take the time to understand myself.
I love that. Number 2. So what would be your, I know this is a hard question, what would be your number 1 tip to the young gay boys of the world?
That's easy. So much easier than the first one. I think that it's important to just love yourself more than anything else in the world. And because when you truly love yourself, that love can go to the people around you. So don't allow the world to confuse you about what that means. Love every part of yourself, like every part of yourself, even the things that are socially awkward or weird. That's part of you. And if you learn to love yourself early, like it's gonna solve a lot of problems for you that will come up later in life if you don't do it as a young person.
Amen. All right. Question number 3. There's 2 more questions after this one.
Okay.
What makes you feel the greatest sense of connection in the world?
Listening, because I've kind of learned that the way I perceive the world is based upon my journey, and that means that if my perception is my reality, everyone else's is based upon their journey. So to understand the world around me, you have to listen and accept. Listen and accept other people's stories. You don't get to tell them what is real and what's not, because their journey happened whether it was with or without you as a person in it.
I love that. So, 4th question. What is one thing that you wish others, and by others I mean the cis heterosexual community, what is one thing that you wish they understood about the gay experience?
Gosh, that like made my eyes water up because I feel like I think about that all the time. I wish they knew like how painful it is to be othered from such a young age, because like that's painful, and that self-hate that their words put in the hearts of the LGBT or the Black community or any community that's othered, like that that sets us down a journey of self-hatred that moves us so far away from our dreams and things that we
Mm.
want to achieve in life. Because like you ask children what they want to do when they grow up, and like gay kids, they have those same dreams, and it's those hateful things that the like straight community says about us, or the white community that says about Black people. Like I think that that sets us back so much further than zero. Like that sets us back to like negative 1,000 in that healing process. Like some people never recover from that.
Mm.
And I think that if more people could understand what it felt like to be othered so harshly, which is why I never understood why there could be a racist gay person or a homophobic Black person, because I feel like when you've been othered in that way, you would never want to make someone else feel that way. And I think that it's something that I've, with the Black Lives Matter and the most recent stuff that happened in Atlanta for like the people in the Asian community, like hearing white straight men talk about those types of things, it is so interesting to hear someone who walks through life without any doubt of who they are as a person, because the world is so built for them. And it's crazy to think that there's people out there that just don't have that doubt that has been put into our community by being othered from such a young age. And I think that that would be what I would want them to experience and understand, or remove that othering altogether so that no one has to experience it. But like I think the most pain I've had to deal with is trying to educate someone who has never been othered on how harmful their hateful words are when they choose to other someone for something that they really can't help. They were born that way.
That's a phenomenal answer. You have me tearing up as well. Thank
I've
you.
tried so hard not to cry right now.
Let it out. Last question.
Okay.
Kind of a fun question, maybe.
Okay. Perfect.
Where are you going from here? Like, what do you have going on in the near future?
So I have honestly been blown into a beautiful, beautiful place that I never ever thought could exist for me as a person. So I've been connected with so many amazing people that want me to jump on their platforms and share my message to reach mass amounts of people. And I just I do so much work to self-heal myself so that I can do as much good for the world, because I know that I do still have triggers. Um, so I'm constantly healing myself so that I can put myself out there more and help
Mhm.
more people. And I mean, with my YouTube channel, with my Instagram, with the podcasts I'm a part of, with the TV shows that have been reaching out to me, I I just want exactly what we just kind of talked about. Like I want people to hear that. I want other people's stories to be like heard. I want people to know that I'm creating a safe space in every sense that I can. And every time something is pointed out that could be a trigger or harmful to someone, like I take that to heart, and I try to do everything that I can in my power to make sure that people know that I'm fighting for a better tomorrow for every community, even the ones that I'm not a part of. So the more that I keep going, It's not easy. It's hard. The bigger the numbers get behind the platforms, the more negativity is thrown my way. But I've gotten to a point where that's kind of bouncing off of me. I always tell people to try to grab the hate and absorb it so that it's not out there in the world anymore. So I'm excited. I've been granted so many fun opportunities that I'm just going to run with and hope that my intuition, my gut feeling, and my love for the people of the world like keeps me going in the right direction. But I'm super excited about it. I've connected with so many beautiful souls out there, and I'm the type of person that I want the whole world to come with me. Like, I'm not doing this by myself. Like, I want everyone to like follow with me and for their stories to be told. I don't open doors, like I get rid of them completely. I take them off the hinges and burn them because I don't want to be one of those people that I'm let in because I'm gay and I hit that minority thing that they want to let in. Like, I want gay people, I want black people, I want women, I want Asian people, Hispanic people. I want all of them to know what it feels like to be able to walk into spaces and know that they got there because they worked hard, not because they are given that chance because someone needed that minority status to be rung for one position in the company. And I just think that that's the work that I'm doing. It's not easy. I definitely have been surrounding myself with people like you and a lot of other people to lean on when life kind of hits me in the face and knocks me down. But it's definitely my intention to make sure that there are better places in the future for future generations. I want to stick around long enough to actually see where kids don't have to come out. They just show up and tell their parents, this is who I'm dating. And I definitely want to do that type of work for the rest of my life.
Well, that was a phenomenal answer, and I just want to say thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah.
You're an awesome person. I feel nothing but love and respect for you as a human being. Like, this was an awesome interview, so I really appreciate you taking time and being here to tell your story and to talk about all that we talked about. I just want to, real quick before we get off here, invite everybody who is on here right now. I have another queer story time happening tomorrow with a woman named Lisa Snow. She is a lesbian woman. She has a phenomenal book out called Spoiler Alert. So I'm going to be interviewing her about her book and kind of about her coming out story and the work that she's doing in the world. So I hope you'll join me tomorrow, and I look forward to continuing to facilitate these conversations. So again, thank you, Drummond, for being here.
Yeah. Thank you for having me and keep doing what you're doing. Like, I absolutely love it. I mean, as soon as I saw that you were doing stuff like this, I was like, perfect. Because there's got to be more than one person doing it. And
Yeah.
I joke about saying just don't have it at the same time my lives are, but you save them. So I'll watch them afterwards if they ever run into each other.
Yeah. Well, everybody be healthy and well. Let us know if you need anything. Hugs and love, and we will see you around.
Yep.
Peace, everybody.
Bye.